Hello, everyone, and we're here on Friday afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Childcare Stimulus Grant application and how to complete it before you actually submit it online. Today is October 16th, and we hope to get some of your questions answered through this recorded webinar. Today we're going to be going over the application attachments, both the ones that are required or the ones you may choose to apply depending on what, or to choose to turn in depending on what you've put into your application. So here we go. I do want to remind you we're about 2 weeks away from the actual deadline of the applications. They're due October 30th at 4 p.m. And so please work on your applications. And the nice thing about the online format is that you can work on your application and then save it and come back to the spot that you might have left off on. You can come back and revise something or come back and upload an attachment once it's ready. So these are the attachments that you should attach to your application. We've kind of separated them into the ones that nonprofit applicants would need to attach, and then the ones for-profit businesses, including our home-based childcare providers. So for the nonprofits, there's a bit more attachments, and you could read the list. There's at least 5 attachments you want to make sure is part of your application. And then for-profit businesses, we're going to go into each of these attachments in a little more detail. Every application will have that maximum grant award calculator attached. I do want to just remind folks that we cannot review any of the your application essentially until they're complete, and that includes all the required attachments are part of that package before you go ahead and hit the submit button. So it's best to hold off and not submit until you have all the required attachments. So here we go, we're going to dive a little bit more in, but you'll see that for-profit businesses, there's at least 3 attachments you're going to want to make sure is part of your package: the maximum grant award calculator, the project budget worksheet, or multiple depending on what you're applying for, and then that Hawaii Compliance Certificate of Vendor Compliance, the Hawaii Compliance Express Certificate of Vendor Compliance. And the last one is an optional attachment, mostly for family childcare providers who are trying to demonstrate the business portion of your home, since we know that your childcare facility is also your home. Okay, here we go into a little more detail. So I'm showing you a screenshot of Nonprofit Gateway, which is our online application portal, and it's showing you one of the screens that you'll see as you're going through the application to attach files and then submit an application. This is where you find those templates, the maximum grant award calculator in Excel, and then the project budget worksheets, both the ones for single site operators or if you're a multi-site provider. So let's start with the maximum grant award calculator. This is a required attachment with all the applications that come in for the Child Care Stimulus Grant Program, whether you're applying for the reboot and reopen option or if you're applying for the stabilization option for the grant award. What it does is it calculates the grant award, your maximum amount per provider based on your provider type and the number of licenses that you hold. There are 2 tabs to fill out on the calculator, and I'll show them to you as we go into a live Excel document with the calculator. The main thing to pay attention to is to make sure you fill out some information on both of those tabs and then save it and upload it as part of your application file. The calculations are done for you, so don't let this spreadsheet intimidate you. It really is just pulling information based on what you enter of your provider type and then telling you how much of an initial grant award you can apply for. So now I'm going to actually open a worksheet so I can show this to you more live. Okay. So what I've pulled up and you should be seeing on your screen is the maximum grant award calculator. And there's two major columns here, that one applying to the childcare stabilization option and one applying to the childcare reboot and reopen option. Now, I'm going to use the example of a provider who operates a service site that's licensed for two different things. One is it has a group childcare center. It also has infant toddler center. So in this spreadsheet, I'm going to actually enter one for the group childcare center. They're open and applying for the stabilization option. And they're also going to enter a one there for infant toddler center. You can see what happens. So if they just had the one group childcare home, they're eligible for $26,000 as part of that initial grant award. Now, if they have these two service sites, their total grant award should be at $52,000, $26,000 for each site. So this is important information that you'll want to know ahead of filling out your application and your project budget. And just so you know, you don't need to fill in zeros or any other information. Just leave it blank if you're not applying for any of these other types. And again, this column for childcare reboot and reopen would be for if you have centers that are not open yet, but you're anticipating and planning to open by November 1st. All right, and then I'm gonna show you, I wanna just really call your attention to the license list that's down here. This is the next tab we're going to be going to. So I drew a red arrow there so you can see it. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and click on it and show you the license list, which is a very short piece to fill out. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that second tab. So you can see here for the example I provided, they're going to enter, this program's going to enter their two license numbers. I made up these numbers. This is my license number 12345, and this site is open. And if you remember, the infant toddler site was also open. That license number is 22222. And again, they're open. So pretty simple. If you have multiple sites, you just list all the license numbers here. And if one is closed, you have the option to pick that as one of the status options. Okay, again, just so you can, I'm going to go back, click on this tab so you can see your information here on the Max Award worksheet is still there. It's still intact. Now, all you need to do is save this form up under here, save it, and then you can go ahead and upload this to your grant application. Great, I'm going to turn us back to the PowerPoint so we can go through a couple more of the attachments. All right, moving on from the maximum grant award calculator. And I do really want to emphasize that's the maximum that your program qualifies for, the box that's showing up in the green down there at the bottom. You can apply for less money than that, but your project budget should not be over that dollar amount because we won't be able to award above that amount. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the grant request itself and the budget. So we're going to go through a couple of the attachment worksheets here, and really the project budget is at the heart of the application for the child care stimulus grants. It helps to tell us what of your expenses are eligible expenses, and also how does it meet the overall grant purpose of ensuring child care is available across the state of Hawaii. Now, I know for some, project budget may sound intimidating, and I really want you to not be intimidated in this process. We have numbers all around us. Everything in life has numbers. And I just encourage you to there's nothing you can do to kind of break this form. There's a template and you can download it again if you feel like you just need to start again from scratch. So here it is. I'm going to go through the budget template, and you'll see this relates to the questions that are in the actual application form. It asks you to put in your total requested amount for the budget, and then we'll be talking a little bit after this about the supplemental grant awards. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open a real example of a project budget now. And I'm going to start here with a single site. So just as if you were a family childcare provider or a preschool just with one license that you hold, this is the form. Your form will look like this. So the information that are in yellow highlighted areas are areas that you'll need to fill out. Here I just entered the name Sunny's Daycare as an example. And from this drop-down menu, Sunny's Daycare, and my fictitious Sunny's Daycare, it's based on Oahu. I'm going to enter that there. And again, this is a drop-down menu that's highlighted. You want to pick what provider type you are. And for this example, I'm going to use a family childcare. So this is a sample of the budget you might put in. The categories down the side map to some of the eligible expenses that are part of this grant award. Things like cleaning services or products that you might need, the lease, rent, or mortgage payments that you need to make for your business, utilities and insurance payments for your business, and even things like staff wages and salaries. So those could all be covered through the payroll, this payroll section here. And then a section for other expenses. So if you need to get supplies, that could range from supplies for caring for children to things like minor improvements to your business in order to reopen and better meet the health and safety guidelines. You can add all of those things in this other column down there. Okay, and then I just wanted to point out that we added these little sticky notes within the project budget to help identify the places and the types of things you should be putting into the budget. So we hope that those help you. If you're feeling a little bit stuck, these yellow boxes can be a good reminder of what to kind of put in these different columns. Now I'm going to start with column B here. This is where you're putting the amount of dollars requested to the Hawaii Community Foundation for the Child Care Stimulus Grant Award. Now, in this example, this family child care provider is a single site like we discussed. So the maximum that the provider would qualify for is $6,000. So let's keep that in our minds because that's going to be important to look at in the total below. And just like balancing a checkbook, you want to make sure you don't go over that amount. So as a family child care provider, I qualify for $6,000. I don't want to put expenses that maybe go up to $9,000 in this because Hawaii Community Foundation won't be able to award you those extra $3,000. So here's some samples I put in. I know that I need to do some deep cleaning, hire a professional cleaner. So I put $140 in for this so that it can help me do cleaning maybe 2 times a month in October and November. These should all be expenses that are for the next 2 months from October 1st through November 30th. Next, as you'll see, personal protective gear or protective equipment, things like masks, gloves, even thermometers. So I use the example of a thermometer here. You might need a touchless contact thermometer so you can take the temperatures of children, staff, or even parents as they come and drop off their children. So I added 2 thermometers in here at $60. And then I'm going to go through these next categories a little more quickly. But what I do want to point out to you is I'm also paying attention to what's in column F here as I enter those dollar amounts in column B. So the column F is for us to understand how does this line item that you're putting in the budget, for example, a professional cleaning service, how does that meet the goal of your grant? How does it help you better meet health and safety standards? How does it help you recover from some of the losses due to the coronavirus pandemic? So any of that information, you can add a quick short note in here. And every line item or every kind of section should have some sort of what's called a budget justification. And budget justification just means a simple way of explaining what that line item is for, especially if there's some more details that you need to share with us, like it covers multiple months or it covers multiple quantities of items. So some things you might see in here is like the time period that it covers, the quantity, or some other pieces that help us detail out how this meets the purpose of the grant. So down here, family child care providers, all providers can cover lease, rent, or mortgage payments. For family child care, you want to pay attention to the business portion of your home. So the example I used here is, paying for a 30-year mortgage for the months of October and November. So that's $600. And what I added here to this budget justification is that because I file my Schedule C, my IRS document, I know that about 30% of my home is used for my family child care business. And I can use that as a nice justification for essentially requesting 30% of my mortgage payment being covered by this grant award. So here you'll see in the budget justification, I said 30% of my home, the business portion is for that $1,800 monthly mortgage statement. Okay, and then scrolling down here, staff wages are allowable use. The important thing is also if you can tell us a little bit about kind of justify the why. So this is for 2 staff, maybe 1 part-time staff and 1 full-time staff. And the reason to help support covering payroll or lost wages is because there was declining revenue or ability of families to pay. And so you didn't have as much money coming in from kind of those tuition payments. And then lastly, this provider realized in order to better address the need for hand washing before coming in the front door, she wanted to add a hand washing station outside her home. So, adding that expense as a minor repair, it can include things like the cost and parts of, the labor and parts of this. And you'll notice one thing I did add here is that this is column D. If you've gotten any other funding sources to help you with your childcare business during this time, and it helped to cover that same expense, please note it here. And if you don't have anything, these just all stay empty or at 0. But for this one, they actually had a private donation who supported this provider with $150 towards doing that hand washing station. So the total project, including labor, was actually $350, and she's just requesting the $200 to kind of complete it. So you'll notice the big thing down here, and this is an important double check for you, is does this amount, it's not over what you, what was in the green box on your maximum grant award calculator that you filled out first. So for a family child care provider, that amount would have showed as $6,000 on the calculator. And you'll see down here really nicely in this total box that all these expenses that she's requesting adds up to $6,000. Now you're also going to want to make sure that this is the number, now that you've done your budget and your attachment, this is the number that you enter onto the application itself in question 11, and that's called the total request amount. So thank you. I hope that explains a little bit about filling out the project budget. And I'm going to alert you again, this one has a second, we're going to get into the second tab piece, but before that, before we do that, I want to actually show multi-site providers, if you're applying, you don't need to apply with every single site a separate application. What you can do is you actually put, it's one organization, one application. That's kind of the way we like to say it. And so all of your sites are covered by this one application, and it just means that your attachment for the project budget is going to be the multi-site project budget. And let me show you what that looks like. So again, here's my fictitious example of Happy Daycare, and we interrupt the information down here. This looks different than the single site provider because there's more information or more possible information to enter. Now you'll want to find the column that pertains to you. So if you're running a group childcare center, you would use column D here, and that's the example I kind of filled out. But if you're running an infant toddler center, you actually would use column E for infant toddler center. And for some providers who have both the infant toddler center and a group childcare home or group childcare center on Oahu, you would actually be showing expenses in column D and column E here. So let's look at it. I'm going to go a little more quickly through this example, but just like the other one, all of the expenses listed here from deep cleaning to touchless thermometers have some sort of budget justification listed out in column K here to help us understand a bit more about how is this meeting your needs as a provider and helping to meet the big goals of the grant to prevent permanent closure, to help address some of the challenges since the coronavirus pandemic, and to ensure stable childcare across the state. So as you can see for Happy Daycare, that's a group childcare center. So it just has the one site here on Oahu. So they're going to fill out this column here on Oahu for all their expenses. And the group childcare center qualifies for up to $26,000. It doesn't have to be that amount, but it needs to be $26,000 or less that you see in this total category here. One thing that I did want to point out is, both was able to cover or request some insurance payments as part of the staff fringe benefits that they provide, so medical, dental, and in addition to the business insurance. And then the other piece is things like art supplies. If you need to amass enough art supplies so that each student has a pair of scissors and maybe one set of box of crayons so the kids aren't sharing a lot, that's another appropriate use of this. And here, the group childcare center, they budgeted $150. That's what they're requesting from Hawaii Community Foundation here. So, and they noted that, so separate crayon packs and scissors per child here. Now, this provider, Happy Daycare, has, they expanded about 5 years ago, and they also run a program on Maui. So that's what makes up their two sites. They're going to actually click on one of these tabs, and then be able to, sorry, actually bumping over to Hawaii Island here, bumping over to where they can fill in this information for their group childcare center site on. Well, in this case, I clicked on the Hawaii Island tab. So not to confuse you, they have a Hawaii Island site as well. Okay, and again, for this provider, that site, if they're a group childcare center on Hawaii Island, they can qualify for up to $26,000. So in total, this application would cover $52,000 for the provider in the initial time period. Okay, I'm gonna flip back to our slide deck so we can go over one more attachment here. Bear with me. Okay, great. So as you can see, the project budget, you should be attaching at least one of those options to your application before you go ahead and hit submit. And you can always work on your attachments and then upload them when you feel like they're ready. Okay, I also wanted to let you know that as part of this grant application, we're actually providers have the option of applying for supplemental grants within the same application. So we'll start considering those supplemental awards in early November. And what it allows for is actually the costs that you've already incurred, as long as they're not covered by another funding source. So they're not duplicating expenses that you might have already received through the Department of Human Services emergency childcare contracts, or through another private funder, or any other piece that has kind of helped your business during this time. And those expenses can cover all the way back from March 15th through September 30th. And the other important piece to note is that you are eligible for the same maximum amount as you were allowed in your initial budget. So what I mean by that is, if you're on your calculator sheet, your maximum grant award calculator, that item in green, it showed up as $52,000 because you run 2 sites that are open. You would again qualify for $52,000 as part of the supplemental option, the supplemental grant awards, if you choose to apply for it. And you don't have to. You can only apply for those October and November expenses if you want. But this is an option, and that makes these pieces optional attachments. So I'm going to show them to you now. And it corresponds with this section of the actual application that I'm showing right here. This is your supplemental request amount. This dollar amount that's in the application here in question 12 should match what you have in your supplemental project budget. So let me go ahead and show you a supplemental budget. I'm going to start again with the single site provider, because that is actually within the same budget template that we did this practice run for Sunny's Daycare. Now, if you go down here and click on the second tab, it says supplemental budget March through September. This is where you can enter your expenses from March 15th through September 30th. And again, you're filling in the same information. You want to enter, this is for Sunny's Daycare on Oahu. So all these pieces, again, make sure that you're filling these out. And this is a family child care home. Similarly, what we're going to be looking for is both the expenses here, and if you justified the expense by letting us know a little bit more of the detail, and how is it going to support your business and some of the need for ensuring that we have stable access to childcare across the state. So those are the things, again, in the project narrative or just the justification. Things like quantity can be helpful, or the time period that those items cover. Any details like that will be really helpful for us to understand. And for home childcare providers, what is the business portion of the expense is particularly important. Okay, so I'm showing you where to do the supplemental site for single site providers, and now I'm going to flip over to the multi-site providers. You actually have a separate budget template for your award, and I actually have it up here right now. And I'm sorry, because I think I was actually showing this to you before. So don't get mixed up, but the easy way to tell is both in the title of your file here. So it says multi-site service budget template supplemental. And anywhere you see supplemental for the multi-site supplemental budget, that's really where you're entering the information for anything that you're requesting that's not in that initial time period. So again, it can cover from March 15th through September 30th. And again, maxing out. So for a group childcare home, this number down here in the total, it could be up to another $26,000. You may not want to request that. Maybe for this provider, they had some of their expenses covered from March through September, and so they're actually only requesting $7,000 supplemental here. Great. And again, because this is an optional piece to apply for, this is an optional attachment to include in your application. I want to talk about one more optional attachment. It's for family childcare providers. And if you file your IRS Schedule C, or if you've had to, when you've had to think about your business portion of your home, you may already be familiar with these forms from the IRS. But to help us, this is an optional attachment, but help us understand kind of what percent of your home you're using for your business. This helps to get at kind of a percentage of your home. So it could be what I used in the example, about 30% of your home. And there's two optional attachments here. The first optional attachment is the IRS Form 8829. And it's the expenses for business use of your home. It walks you through a whole worksheet about how you figure that out. And then you can upload it as an attachment as part of your application file. What the part we're really want to know is what the percentage is. What is the percentage, so that we can understand that as part of the justification for the expense. Now, the other way that small business owners calculate this expense is through this option 2. It's the IRS Simplified Method Worksheet. And so this is a bit of a, it's not as lengthy in terms of the information about how you calculate it. And this would be another acceptable optional attachment if you want to help us understand what percent of your home you're kind of using for your business. And it helps to kind of distinguish between for any expenses that might be shared between business and personal. You can find the link to these forms, both of them, in the FAQ section of the Child Care Stimulus Grant page that's accessible at hawaiicommunityfoundation.org. And finally, another required attachment is the Hawaii Compliance Express Certificate, and it's the Certificate of Vendor Compliance. It actually covers 4 different agency requirements around compliance. So it looks at IRS, it looks at Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, the Department of Consumer and Commerce Affairs, and also Department of Taxation here locally in Hawaii. You will need to upload this certificate as part of your application to have your application considered complete before hitting that submit button. So I know many providers are in process or have submitted pieces so that they can get this certificate showing up as an example of compliant across all these categories. What you see on the right there is actually Hawaii Community Foundation Certificate of Vendor Compliance that we needed to submit to DHS. So we just recently went through the process as well. I did want to point out that this Certificate of Vendor Compliance is different from the DCCA Certificate of Good Standing. Sometimes it's called COGS. And that form on its own is not acceptable as the attachment to this grant application. What we're looking for is the Hawaii Compliance Express Certificate. Now there's a list of all eligible expenses, or at least kind of the categories of them, to get you going as part of the FAQ and the top section of our website that gives more information about the child care stimulus grants. So I'm not going to go over these in detail, but I will flip through these so you can read through them on your own. And you can always go to the website to get this information or find it. These, you'll notice, they line up really well with the categories that are in the project budget template. Grants will not cover things like administrative or indirect costs, and also things like entertainment or staff perks, which are called perquisites, or any sort of lobbying activity or campaign contributions, which is important as we're coming up to November. So the bottom part of this slide shows the start of what it will cover, of course, cleaning supplies and personal protective gear. And then I'm going to flip to the next pages you can read on your own as well. But things like that we already went over: the lease, rent, mortgage payments, utilities or insurance payments, and then actual payroll, so staff wages and also staff salaries. Can also cover things like staff training or reopening costs if you need to make minor modifications or get extra kind of changes to your environment to help meet some of the health and safety guidelines. And then actually purchasing things for caring for children that could look like diapers, wipes, infant formula. Really, I do think that fixed costs, like the ones you might have for your rent, lease, or mortgage, are a great use to put in the project budget because you know that they're expenses that are already happening within the month of November and October. If you need more support or you'd like to have a sounding board with someone around your application, both Patch, our local resource and referral agency, as well as Learning to Grow staff can help you through different components of the process. And I've put up here their contact information, both a phone number and either an email address or where you can find their contact information, because for Patch, you want to look for it by island. They have staff available on every island, and they're a terrific resource. And similarly, if you need us to connect you with someone at Patch or Learning to Grow, please feel free to reach out to us at caregrants@hcfhawaii.org. But rest assured, Patch and Learning to Grow staff are really standing by to help support you in this process. So if you have questions or just maybe want to review something with someone more directly, they can be a great resource. Now, to find other things that might help you complete this application and be really comfortable and confident in what you're putting in your application, I want to point you to the website for the Child Care Stimulus Grants. That's there at the top. There's a link there to an informational webinar. There's an application preview packet, which includes a lot of great information before you even kind of get into our nonprofit gateway online portal. And it also has a very rich set of frequently asked questions, both ones we've been receiving from providers and we try and update it, and then also ones that we've generated on our own, knowing some of the requirements around the Federal CARES Act. We have both a dedicated email address and phone number. You can reach us there. And I did also want to alert you to that I will do office hours every Monday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. If you're interested in signing up for those Zoom office hours on the Child Care Stimulus Grant Program, feel free to reach out to the email address and we can send you a kind of the login information for those office hours. I hope this webinar has been incredibly helpful to you and helps you feel more confident about the attachments as part of your application. I do want to just say kind of the big theme is make sure that you have all the pieces together and the attachments feel complete to you before you hit that final submit button. Once you hit submit, you're really telling Hawaii Community Foundation, my application is complete and it's ready for you to review. And you have time to always go back into your online application. It's saved there, and you can go back into it if you need to kind of do this in steps over multiple days, or you have a question and you're working with someone from one of the organizations like Patch or Learning to Grow. You can always get your questions answered and then kind of pick up the application or some of the attachments again. But you need to do that ahead of the submit button. So wonderful. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I hope again that you apply, and I encourage you to start as early as possible. Thank you.